Sunday, December 30th, 2018, marks 1,209 days since the publication of my fourth novel, A Book About a Film. Released Tuesday, September 8th, 2015. What's the significance of 1,209 days, you might ask? Well, 1,209 days is the longest I've ever gone without releasing a novel. Every few months, I'll drop a post on my official website, www.cwschultz.com, detailing my current projects. But since this is the longest I've ever gone without releasing anything, I thought I'd go the extra mile and make a video about my next novel. Ordinarily, I want my work to speak for itself, so I don't give a whole lot of information in my posts. However, I feel like I owe everyone something a little less subtle than usual. This includes a sample chapter read by yours truly, so stick around. My forthcoming fifth novel is titled Whispering of the Autumn Leaves. It's a medieval high fantasy about a group of outlaws from all different walks of life who go on a suicide mission to defeat a great evil that lives in a haunted forest. While in this haunted forest, however, they discover that their sacrifice will be in vain. The story is told in an epistolary format, with each chapter comprising as a series of articles, confessions, journal entries, personal statements, and even a thesis. There's even a character named Lihan, the only non-human point of view character in Whispering of the Autumn Leaves, who is a red-crested jay, a fictional bird inspired by ravens and cockatiels. Lihan's chapters are told through bescribing scraps, which is scrap paper used while translating communications from an animal. The person who is gifted with the ability to understand animals is called a bescribe. In a novel with multiple characters, I'd say Lihan is the fourth most prominent, so the book isn't flooded with these bescribe scraps. However, during Lihan's chapters, the narrative shifts to a cool bird's eye view / fly on the wall type of story. But don't worry, this isn't just some cheap plot device to have an omniscient narrator. Lihan's limitations for being a fragile bird and the mysteriousness of whom his bescriber is plays a major part in the overall story. The point of view characters document the events they witness for several different reasons. Some do it for the comfort of it, which is something I can personally relate to, as writing is a comfort for me. Others do it for being immortalized as a primary source, which is, in fact, an essential component into our own reality's historical methodology. Another motive that some characters have for writing these texts that make up the narrative of this story is for religious obligations, and I personally can't think of a more real-life parallel, as we all know that people are capable of doing anything to fulfill what they believe are their religious obligations. There are multiple religions in the world that Whispering of the Autumn Leaves takes place in, but the most prominent beliefs in this story stem from a spade-shaped object that floats in the sky. The people of this medieval world that the story takes place in don't know any better than to call it a cloud chariot, and the people inside these cloud chariots are known as charioteers, who end up playing a hidden yet vital role. Though I don't want to get too much into that, not only because it'll spoil a lot about the book, but also I don't want people to mistake this as a heavy sci-fi novel. Ultimately, Whispering of the Autumn Leaves is a cross between Robert Jordan's Eye of the World and Bram Stoker's Dracula. I like to think of Whispering of the Autumn Leaves more like a gothic fairy tale. Our main characters live in a world simply called the Known World. The reason for this simplistic name is because they know the world hasn't been fully discovered. If they sail too far north in the Skyark Sea, the water begins to bubble from intense heat, and the crewman's skin redden and blister. If they sail too far south in the Frigid Sea, the ship eventually sails into an ocean of solid ice. In Whispering of the Autumn Leaves, the story takes place on a continental island called Vonerja, in a territory called Baromedy, in a region called Denland, and in the capital city of Den Regal. The territory of Baromedy is ruled by Queen Rosanna Hollide, whose son, Prince Zandro Hollide, has mysteriously disappeared. Most people believe he was kidnapped by Ryla Bow, a sorceress who has been kidnapping Den Regal's children for many years, and bathes in their blood to preserve her youth. She is believed to live in the royal forest, a vast wooded area said to be haunted. This is the same forest that the aforementioned group of outlaws trek into, as entering the royal forest is considered certain death. The following is Chapter 3 from Whispering of the Autumn Leaves, called The Andals, Part A. The Andals is a gazette-like publication that compiles theses, amateur theories, and journal entries. Only the most interesting submissions are printed in the Andals annual volumes, known as issues. As a side note, if this sounds overwhelming, don't worry. A glossary, maps, and a character listing are all included in the book so that you can keep track and refresh who belongs to what particular family, gang, or race. So here it is, Chapter 3, The Andals A. A public service article published in the 1231st issue, titled The Sultrist and the Shamist. Monsters have always lurked in the royal forest, a vast wooded area crossing into the regions of Denland, Everdurk, and Wistvandorian. It was a story to teach children not to wander far, or to help them visualize the unknown evils of the world. Now, however, it appears some of the monsters have emerged from the royal forest to kidnap the children. Within the last few cycles, the amount of missing children has increased. Reports stretch from the royal forest's nearby farmlands like Naidney all the way into the northern side of Den Regal, particularly the Roach Hill district. Some believe there are hex miners turning children into red-crested jays, the blackbird with the flame-red crest. However, these birds aren't seen nearly as frequently as the rate of disappearing children, thus debunking this theory. 2 men were spotted emerging out of the royal forest. One was described as fat and balding, while the other was said to be thin and covered in locks of blonde hair. The former cradles the bulky harp instrument of a psaltery, while the other carries the slender flute instrument of a sham. They've been dubbed the Psalterist and the Shamist. Both tall in stature, their footsteps make for long strides, explaining why witnesses have had difficulty chasing them down when they see a child in their company. The sound of music can be heard as the Shamist leads the child back into the royal forest's borders of black pine trees, which are so tall they reach into the clouds on a rainy day. The Psalterist waddles behind his partner in crime and their young captive, ensuring the child doesn't escape the musical trance. Days later, the child is found in the farmlands, identified only by the clothes he or she was last seen wearing. All that is left is a dry skeleton, as if the child has been dead for decades. Skin and all organs are completely gone, and the bone is as clean as polished ivory. People believe a witch lives in the royal forest, and they named her Ryla Bow. The name comes from the Mirian language the villagers in Naidney use, which is directly translated to evil-eyed lady. Ryle meaning eye, meaning feminine, and bow meaning evil. They say she's centuries old and uses black magic to allow the children's skin and organs to prolong her youth. The younger the child is, the longer it takes her to age again. The Psalterist and the Shamist are her warlocks, commanded to retrieve her sacrifices. Many expeditions have been organized in an attempt to save children seen leaving with the warlocks. However, these same expeditions are usually soon abandoned, with the child's skeleton always turning up days later. While in the royal forest, people who have survived the expedition claim to experience spirits speaking to them, as well as strange disorientations that cause nausea and euphoria at the same time. These disorientations greatly affect the sense of direction, resulting in parties traveling in complete circles, as well as a sense of time being paralyzed, with nights seeming to last as quickly as a few minutes or as long as several days. Beasts in the royal forest also show signs of ravenousness, with bears, unisaurs, and wolves oft attacking and killing members of the search party. The probability of being attacked by an exceptionally aggressive beast has led many to conclude that entry to the royal forest is equal to certain death. When King III of Jamanus Halid introduced the punishment of banishment to the royal forest back in 978, he had heard the stories of these aggressive animals. Now, with the witch and 2 warlocks emerging from the haunted woods, the probability of survival lessens, and the punishment of banishment to the royal forest is even crueler. Because the child's body usually turns up in the farmlands while the expedition is in place, horrific bewilderment arises by how the body is disregarded without the psalterist and the shaman's reemergence being noticed. Theories have included an invisibility spell, teleportation, or that the children are being led into the royal forest and exited through a different path as a diversion. If the entrance to the royal forest is just an elaborate distraction, there are plenty of barns and small castles between Naidney and Den Regal that the children can easily be taken to. In other words, the psalterist and the shamus might not be just warlocks. They could be your neighbor. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed the sample chapter and that it gets you pumped for Whispering of the Autumn Leaves. Unfortunately, a publication date hasn't been set yet. Honestly, it could take another few years. This is easily the most difficult and longest work I've ever written. But I have given detailed instructions to my wife and my father, just in case anything happens to me. So, regardless of who ends up publishing Whispering of the Autumn Leaves, or regardless of what happens to me, unless the world comes to an end, you'll be able to read Whispering of the Autumn Leaves eventually. As always, thank you for your interest and support. Please like and subscribe. Also check out my website, www.cwschultz.com, and my Patreon. Views, subscribes, and likes help me make more videos like this, so your viewership and readership are always appreciated. Happy endings.